Welcome to Lesson 5. During this lesson, you're going to be learning how to determine who the East player is, breaking the wall, the deal, racking the tiles, and the initial tile setup. We're going to start out this lesson by determining who the East player is. And the East player is the player that begins the game. So let's go ahead and start by rolling the dice. Now I have thrown a 9. The next player will roll the dice in a counterclockwise motion. So player 2, who is to my right, will roll the dice as well. And then it will continue around the table, again in a counterclockwise motion or to the right. And the next player will roll, and then the next player will roll. Whoever has the highest roll on the dice becomes the East player. So let's say I rolled a 7 and I'm the East player. The first thing you want to do is pick up the dice from the table and move them over just by the next player, who will be East's rack. This indicates to them that they are now the next player who will be rolling the dice to break the wall. All right, so we have rolled a 7 on the dice, and now it's time to break the wall. Breaking the wall in Mahjong is very much like splitting a deck of cards. It prevents cheating. And I'm not going to go over how one cheats in Mahjong, but trust me when I say that cheating does go on in almost every game, including Mahjong. So this breaking the wall does prevent that, as I said, just as it's done in cards. Now, what I'm going to do now that I have pushed out my entire wall is I am going to count out 7 tiles, including the top and bottom tiers here. And I'm going to show you several ways to do this break, and then you will eventually adapt to your own style of breaking the wall. 2, 4, 6, 7. There is the break in the wall, and these are the tiles that we pull back and hold. Now, if you hold the tiles with a little bit of light pressure on both ends, they will easily move. If you grab the tiles like this, the chances are they're going to collapse on you. So make sure that that doesn't happen, because then it's going to be challenging getting them right in the same order from where they came. All right, so hold them like this, a little bit of pressure, and pull them back. That's one way to do the break. Another way to do the break is to count the tiles out right from where they sit by your rack, in front of your rack. So you pull them out a little bit, and then you could go 2, 4, 6, 7. And then you could do the same thing that we did before by putting a little bit of pressure on the tiles and moving them very carefully to the center of the table. All right, I'll show you another way. All right, so the same thing would apply if you wanted to push them out. And instead of separating them out the way I did originally, you could then pull back 2, 4, 6, and 7. And you could do it that way. And I'm going to show you one more way. I want you to have all the ways that I've seen it done, and I'm sure there's probably some I I'm not going to get to, but nonetheless, these are the most common. Okay, so the next one would be you push it out a little bit and you hold back your 7, 2, 4, 6, 7. And then these tiles are moved out of the way and the rest of the tiles are pushed out by using the actual rack. All right, and then you have to put these tiles back in place exactly how they came. Now I want you to note something right now. This is very important. When you break the wall, the tiles that are counted out from the dice that are your break in the wall come back and sit exactly where they came from. To the right, this is exactly how they came from. And I'm going to explain to you why this is important. Well, first of all, the most important thing of all to me is that this is where they came from, so this is where they belong. The second thing is that when we pick tiles from the wall and push out additional tiles, it goes in a clockwise motion or to the left. So we pick to the right in Mahjong and we push out the wall tiles to the left. With this opening here, it's a nice little lead-in to remind us of which way we're going to be pushing the walls. Okay, so that is the reason why it is important to leave the tiles right where they are. When you start playing with other players, you're going to start to see that there are a lot of things that are done differently because people were taught differently. Maybe they weren't taught the right way, or they weren't taught at all and they've learned it themselves. Regardless of what it is, we can't change how everybody else does things, but you can learn the right way and you could do it the right way. So if you are to see somebody's tiles sitting here or sitting here, you'll know that it's supposed to be done this way. All right, now that the wall is broken and you have an idea of the different ways to do the break, it's time for the tiles to get dealt out or dealt in, however you want to refer to it. But I do want to mention that in Mahjong, dealing is not the same as in a card game. In a card game, you have a dealer who deals all of the cards out for the other players, and that is required of the dealer. In Mahjong, the dealer is the individual player. So everybody picks in their own tiles. And yes, it's still called a deal, and picks their own tiles. So I'm going to pick my first two. And let me show you that again. First two. They are picked in groupings of 4 tiles, 2 from the top and 2 from the bottom. We pick tiles during the game counterclockwise to the right, and it's the same way when the deal is done. The next player will pick their 4 tiles, and the next player will pick their 4, and it continues around. When it gets back to the East player, who is the starting player for not only starting the deal, but for discarding their first tile, East will then take another set of 4 tiles. All right, now we've run out of wall tiles on the table. So how do we push them out? We push them out to the left. And to the left is clockwise. All right, now the next player will take their tiles, and now we continue on until we get back to East again. Now East will take another set of 4, and it will continue around until we get back to East again. And now East has 3 sets of 4 for a total of 12 tiles. East has the advantage of having 1 more tile to start with than the others, and this was mentioned in the previous lesson. So for East to pick those 2 tiles, the way it is done is they take the first and the third tiles. I'm going to show you, everybody always says, well, why do they do it that way? And most often you're going to hear, because that's the way it's done. But I'm going to show you why it's done that way, and it's pretty much a shortcut. So hang on, and I want to go ahead and deal out the rest of the tiles to everybody else, and then I'm going to go back and repeat that so you could see why East takes the first and third tiles. Okay, so now the next player to the right takes their 13th tile from the first available, which was on the bottom, and the next, and the next. All right, now we have 14 tiles for East, 13 for each of the other players. All right, now if we reverse that and start out again, if East were to take 1 tile and this player take the second tile, the next tile for their 13th, and the next player takes their next tile for 13, and finally this tile, the next tile for East to take is the top one here, which actually ends up being the first and third tile. All right, so that's why that is done like that. It's just a little bit of a shortcut. And I'm going to go ahead and do that first and third again and deal out the last tile to everybody. Alrighty, there we go. Beautiful. Everybody's got their tiles in. And before we move on, I want to mention that before the tiles are put up on everybody's rack, it is important that all players verify that they have the correct number of tiles. And this is why we leave them in the groupings on the top of our card until that is done. Once you've verified you have the right number of tiles, we can move on to the next step. And now it is time to what we call rack our tiles. And racking our tiles is merely putting them up on the rack, and it would be, this part of the rack is called the sloped part of the rack, or sloping part of the rack, and you heard about that in the previous lesson. I'm going to go ahead and move my rack out here and just tilt it so you get a better view of what I am doing. The tiles get set up in numerical order by suit. I put Winds and Dragons to the right. The reason I put Winds and Dragons on the right is because they have their own category, and it's almost the last category on the card, other than singles and pairs. So I'm going to go ahead and set this up in numerical order and put my Winds and Dragons on the right, and I put my jokers on the left at the beginning of all of my tiles. And now I'm just going to proceed to put these in suit order, just like this. Okay, so here we have our BAMs in numerical order, the cracks, the dots, the winds, and the dragons, or dragons and winds. If I had flowers after the deal, I would have put those flowers at the beginning of the suit tiles and the winds and dragons. And the reason I put flowers at the front of the hand is because in all of the hands on the 2023 card. The flowers are at the beginning of the hands. In previous years, they were not only at the beginning of all of the hands, but sometimes you would find them in between. But I must say that the majority of the time, flowers are found at the beginning of the hands. All right, well, that concludes lesson number 5, and I will see you shortly in lesson number 6.